tell us, what was your job interview like with President Bush?
I didn't really have one. It kind of evolved over time. I was in the administration for a little over 7 years. I joined right after 9/11. My friend worked at the Justice Department. I kept in touch with her on the 5, and one of the things I write about in the book is advice about staying in touch with people and making friends, not just networking. I don't like that idea of just like networking, because networking means that you come to an event like this and you meet people who you think can help you get to the next step in your career. I made a lot of friends and I kept in touch with them, and so they knew that I was willing to come back to DC. And in fact, in August 2001, my husband and I, that's a whole other story you might ask about, but my husband and I are in California. I want to work for the administration. I make a plan to come to Washington, D.C. the week of September 17th, and I contacted my friend at the Justice Department and said, I'm going to come do some informational interviews, so if you hear of anything, let me know, and maybe we'll get together. And then 9/11 happened. And so she called me 3 days later and said she needed another spokesperson on her team, and would I be willing to come to Washington. So I started packing even before we got off the phone, and I left about a week or two later. And I never went back to San Diego. So my job interview with President Bush actually never really happened. I just sort of melted into the deputy press secretary position, partly because I was at Justice Department, then I was at White House Council on Environmental Quality. They knew me and they trusted me. The chief of staff, Andy Card, is the one who said we should bring her in as deputy press secretary. And the president just said, glad to have you aboard. And there's some great stories about those early days, like being on Marine One with him and him handing me his peanut butter and honey sandwich, and that was how we really bonded. So my other piece of advice in the book is always take the deputy job, because that's when you really get to learn the job and the responsibilities, and you can then step in. Tony Snow was the press secretary. I worked for Scott McClellan, then Tony Snow inherited me. On the day that I got the job as press secretary, it was the day that I was going to resign from the White House. And that's how I start chapter 3. And Ed Gillespie, who was the communications director, I went into the White House that morning full of knots, because I didn't really want to leave the White House, but my health was in question at the time, mostly self-imposed, and my husband missed me, and we decided that for another year and a half, just being the deputy probably wasn't good enough. I should move on and do something else. So I get to the White House in the morning, and I saw Ed Gillespie said, hey, can I see you after the meeting? He says, oh yeah, I need to talk to you too. So I said, okay, great. So I'm in the meeting, just so nervous, and at the end, he said, he dismissed everybody, and then he says, Dana, can you stay? And you know how that is, if you think someone's in trouble. So everybody leaves, and I sat down, and I went to speak, because I just felt like I needed to rip the Band-Aid off. And he said, do you mind if I go first? I said, sure. So I sat back, and that's when he said, the president wants to make you the press secretary on Monday. And Ed never knew, until he read the book, that I was planning to resign.